Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with our first second chance chat. We're just giving everyone a few more moments to assemble. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to JSTOR Access in Prison's very first second chance chat of 2023. My name is Stacy Burnett. I manage the JSTOR Access in Prison program, where we bring academic resource tools inside jails, prisons, and other carceral settings on 2 continents, absolutely free of charge to incarcerated people, the Departments of Corrections, and higher ed programs. So today, we are getting started with Second Chance Chats. Every Wednesday this month from 3 to 4 p.m., we will spend an hour with interesting people doing interesting things in their post-prison life. In one instance, we're actually going to go live inside a prison in the Maine Department of Corrections to explore the role technology is playing to help people who are currently incarcerated identify and create second chances for themselves and improve the lives of people in communities beyond the prison walls. The common thread in all of these discussions is education. Before introducing Patrick Rodriguez and Donnie Washington Jr. for today's chat, I'm going to highlight a little bit of what's to come this month and to invite you all to attend the rest of our second chance chat. Next slide, please. So next Wednesday, we're going to have award-winning journalist and author Keri Blakinger, who will explore how writing helped her navigate prison and the difficulties she experienced re-enrolling in Cornell University after her release from a New York State prison. We'll have Olga Miliman, the Associate Director of a CUNY program that makes their college campus more supportive of people with conviction histories. And she'll explain how the problems encountered by Keri in reentry can be mitigated. We're also going to have Caits Messner from PEN America's Prison and Justice Writing Program to discuss the vital role self-expression plays and how people discover their voice. And I believe that people engaging with PEN America promotes the skills necessary to navigate life as well as pursue academic success post-release. That informal learning is crucial, and Caits' work demonstrates what's possible when we promote self-expression and leverage time outside the classroom for pro-social behavior and pursuits. So as Second Chance Pell increases the number of people seeking college attainment post-release, their work and journeys provide insight into how we can make the transition more trauma-informed and beneficial for positive student outcomes and better campus life. Next slide. The next session is going to be really special. It addresses the needs of students with disabilities who struggle to obtain education during incarceration. Ben Wright is going to reunite with Dr. Jennifer Montag, who helped make education more acceptable for people with hearing loss in the facility where he served his sentence. We found out about this because Ben had submitted an essay into our Second Chance Writing Contest and mentioned Dr. Jen, and I recognized the name immediately because she had reached out to JSTOR Access in Prison last year to discuss some of her research. I thought it would be really wonderful for us to hear about their journey and to learn more about the resources Jennifer has made to support the needs of learners with all types of challenges obtain an education while they're inside a carceral setting. Next slide, please. Our last second chance chat is going to come to us live from inside the Maine Department of Corrections. The students inside Maine have many options for education, and they have uncommon access to technology that enables them to communicate more openly with the world outside. And this is really unusual. And we can talk with them about how they use their platform to influence communities both inside the prison as well as outside to the rest of the world. It helps embrace change, healing, and really expand possibilities. Stephen will introduce us to his awakening broadcasts, how he was inspired to create them, and how he accomplishes its production while he's incarcerated, and his hopes for the impact that the Awakening Exchange will have. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier how Ben found his way to us via a second chance essay submission. Every day in April, we share a new essay on the JSTOR Access in Prison LinkedIn page. We feature an essay, a letter, artwork. All of it is submitted by a person who has been impacted by the criminal legal system. The majority are people who are currently inside a carceral setting. Each one of the 300 plus submissions we received were remarkable for even just how they made their way to us, told a story all by themselves. I'd like to give special thanks to Charlotte West of College Inside for printing the call for submissions, and to all the educators and librarians who printed the posting and brought it to their students inside. These submissions are so full of energy. They offer an unvarnished look at education, success, and struggles associated with carceral spaces. I also encourage you all to check out the American Prison Newspaper Archive from Reveal. If these firsthand accounts are interesting to you, you can see more over literally more than a century of writings from people who produced their work while they were inside a jail or a prison. Next slide, please. I would like to address language during our webinars. I'd like to emphasize people first language because it is important. I extend an invitation to everyone here today to attempt to use it. It can feel awkward. I know it can be a little clunky initially. It takes some time to really grow accustomed to it. When I was in prison, the New York State Department of Corrections changed terminology from inmate to offender, and I really remember I just really hated hearing that. I didn't like the way it made me feel. It hurt, but so language does matter. We don't have to be perfect. I know I don't get it right every time myself. I encourage everyone to at least try. And please, let's extend grace to each other while we are all still learning. So sign up for all of our chats, one of our chats, spend time with people. It's great to be in community with people who are interested in learning more about these things. Share them with your networks. The sessions covering disabilities and campus readiness were specifically chosen because of the feedback we received and the number of questions that we get about it. And so we wanted to make sure that these two critical components of prison-based education were covered. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's get started with today's session, which is going to feature Patrick Rodriguez from the JSTOR, our JSTOR Access in Prison Student Advisory Board. Patrick has invited Donnie Washington Jr. to participate because of his groundbreaking work for the Marshall Project, and that includes Inside Story. Donnie has used his education in very interesting ways since his release, in ways some probably never expected or wouldn't have thought possible when he started his educational journey. And we're going to let you sample it with the following minute-long montage. So please post your questions in the Q&A. We'll incorporate them into this session. And so let's roll the clip.
I'm Lawrence Bartley, and I'm proud to introduce Inside Story, a new video series about the U.S. criminal justice system from the people who lived it.
They took the years away that was supposed to teach us how to grow up and be a man and replaced it with straight violence.
I grew up in a system, spent nearly 3 decades behind bars. My co-creator was also incarcerated, and many others working on this show.
Yes, I'm very popular on the yard, I'm aware.
Our experience has helped us make something raw, unexpected, and always, I mean always, real.
The kids were screaming at the cops, "Don't shoot."
I was numb, I was a zombie.
That's what you expect from us at the Marshall Project and our partners at Vice News. This show is personal, but it's also one of a kind. It's the only show about the system that will be distributed and broadcast to the general public and to people inside. What we've learned with our news magazine, News Inside, is that incarcerated people have little access to information that's relevant to their lives.
They don't have the basic necessities that they need to survive.
And people on the outside really get to see what those lives actually look like. We're gonna change that.
Hey, I can't actually hear you at the moment.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect.
Okay, this is not Zoom. So let me center that for one moment. It's not Teams, nor is it WebEx, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patrick Rodriguez, and I am super excited to be able to be here. First off, shout out to JSTOR. Shout out to all the formerly incarcerated people that are in this space watching this webinar. Shout out to Jay Holder. Shout out to the National Executive Council. My name is Patrick Rodriguez. I am one of the members of the advisory board of the JSTOR Access in Prison Initiative. And I will be hosting today's Second Chance Chat, which I love Second Chance Chat, but try and say it 3 times fast and you got a tongue twister. Second Chance Chat, Second Chance, it's just a little bit difficult, but I'm super excited about it and super excited to really be in conversation with you, Donald. We're going to have a riveting conversation where we're going to explore a little bit about where you're from, a little bit about your story, a little bit about your project, some of the relationships that you've built, and things of that nature. But before we get into that, I really want you to start by telling us a little bit about who you are. Who is Donald Washington Jr.? You know, what do you do? And what got you into this work?
Yeah, well, thank you for hosting this and opening this conversation. I say who I am is evolving, right? Like all people. And that's key in education because education is the key to evolution. Who I am currently, I'm currently the director of Inside Story, which is sort of the explainer video you just saw alluded to what Inside Story is. So Inside Story was created by myself and Lawrence Bartley, who's also formerly incarcerated. I served 15 years in New York State Prison, and Lawrence served 27 years in prison. And what we wanted to do was create a product that people on the inside could feel empowered by, informed by, and something that would just be useful for people who have been touched by the criminal justice system. That includes people who live on the inside and those who work on the inside. It's been quite a journey to get to this point. As I mentioned, I'm formerly incarcerated. I was released from prison in 2018 after serving just under 15 years. And as you can imagine, it's been quite a journey to get to the point that I am now and to develop Inside Story. So I know you asked a number of things, and there are a number of ways I can answer that question. But that's who I am. Who I am is a filmmaker who's working to help the underserved find their voice. One thing you'll notice about that sort of montage that you just saw, if you would have blinked, you would have easily missed me. part of the reason for that is because I feel like it's important for us to be on all sides of the issue and the conversation as it relates to incarceration. I'm more of a behind the scenes sort of guy. Yeah.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for that. And first off, congratulations, right? Congratulations are in order. You're collaborating with Vice News and also the Marshall Project. Vice News has a history of really great reporting on really tough issues. And when we think about incarceration, incarceration is a tough issue. It's a tough issue to talk about. It's a tough issue to break down some of the stereotypes that exist with, that exist with it. But I do believe that based on your lived experience, you and Lawrence Bartley are the right people to be doing this. And so I want you to, we're going to stick with you and Lawrence Bartley for a second. Would you talk about that relationship between you two? 27 years, 15 years, doing what you're doing, it almost seems impossible, but there was a conversation you had before any of this came to fruition. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, part of the reason why we created Inside Story, part of the genesis comes from News Inside, which is a print publication, essentially a news magazine that was created by Lawrence Bartley with the Marshall Project, through the Marshall Project. And the idea was to provide the Marshall Project's quality of journalism to people on the inside. One thing that we found with News Inside, although it is very successful and it's in prisons and jails throughout the country, we recognized that there were limitations that people on the inside had in terms of their ability to consume a written product. So many people face literacy challenges, but some people just have a preference to consume their news visually. So we wanted to create a product that could satisfy that need, and that's how Inside Story was born. There were several long days and weekend trips to Lawrence's place to actually work through the early versions of Inside Story in Lawrence's living room, right? With me behind the camera and handling all of the early production work, and Lawrence handling all of the on-screen and journalistic work. And not only did we believe in the project, but we recognized the need for it, right? One thing I like to tell people about Inside Story and why it's important is that representation matters, right? When people on the inside are able to look at Lawrence as someone who served 27 years on the inside, who's come out to do the things that he's done, it kind of feeds that sense of hope and change and possibility for those who are on the inside. So that's definitely a key component of what we've been doing. As I mentioned, it started in Lawrence's living room, and there have been various iterations of it. And during that process, Vice News got wind of what we were doing, us at the Marshall Project, and they really wanted to be a part of it. And Inside Story has become this great collaboration. So the first season has ended. The last episode was released on Vice News' YouTube channel just 2 weeks ago, and people can go there and they can watch the entire playlist. They can go there and watch the entire playlist. We're well over 1 million views for the entire season, and we hope to continue to push that number and have more conversation around this series.
Awesome. So I love what you said, not just belief, but need, right? I think for me, and I'm going to take just a moment to kind of build on what you just stated. You come from humble beginnings. You come from literally starting in a living room, having these conversations, thinking about, what it is that you're going to do to bring this to fruition. And a lot of change makers, and again, I want to speak to the formerly incarcerated people that are out there. I've been in that similar situation, especially my brother Jay Holder. We've been in living rooms, late night conversations, thinking about what is it that we're going to design, what is it we're going to put into place. And at that moment in time, there's a vision and there's like steps that you want to take to get there. But I think, unfortunately, sometimes there's so many people that have those small conversations that might not get that nudge of like, you can do it. So anybody who's in their living room right now, drawing on a piece of paper an idea and thinking about what change you want to make, I just want to take a second and encourage you and say that if nobody's telling you that you can do it, we're here telling you today that you can do it. And I'm going to kind of transition a little bit, belief but need. I want to stick there. I was actually reading an article that was written about you, and it mentioned self-improvement was possible in prison and how you saw that as a possibility. Would you talk about the internal shift that happened whenever you were incarcerated?
Yeah, there were a number of individuals, but I remember this key moment when I saw a PBS video about a guy who was formerly incarcerated. He educated himself while on the inside. He returned to society, and he developed this reentry program. And it was still early, I guess, in the stage of the program, but it just kind of flipped the switch in my mind. He had served about 15 years, and he just went full circle. One thing that I really appreciated about the individual, as I saw him displayed, he had been dealing with one of his staff, who was also a friend, a personal friend, who had been struggling with addiction and kind of relapsed. And I appreciated the way he handled it. And I think it kind of showed that you can still maintain who you are, who you conceive yourself as you evolve, right, on this journey called life. That's something I really appreciate. For me, I was fortunate enough to be transferred to a facility where higher education was offered. And it was something that I wanted. So I walked into prison with the 8th grade education. I walked out with a graduate degree, right? But when I walked into this facility that I'm referring to, I had just my GED, and there was a college program, and I wasn't eligible for it. So the program was higher link for higher education. It was Mercy College. The program at that time required that a person had already have college credits, existing college credits, and I didn't have any. So I just devised this plan to save up a little bit of money. I started working in the prison mess hall to save up a little bit of money to purchase a correspondence course to become eligible. Because I said, hey, listen, I only need 3 credits, right? I only need 3 semester credits, and that's what I did. I went to that prison library and got some dusty sociology books, and I studied, right? Now, they were literally dusty. They were very dusty. They hadn't been touched in years, but it was like, hey, there's some useful information there. And anytime you study the social sciences, which I did, it's a bit of self-exploration, right? So just like learning about sociological dynamics, I started to see different things that impacted my life. And prison can be tricky, right? I like to tell people that, there's physical prison and there's a mental prison, right? And often the mental prison, the key to getting out of that is education. So as I began to educate myself, I began to re-envision who I could be. And like I said, that's a process that continues, right? And education is something that continues. So the work that I'm doing now required me to teach myself. So I'm self-taught. I'm autodidactic in that I taught myself how to use cameras, how to shoot, how to light a set, right? How to edit video, how to do different things on the production side. And I learned from the world, right? I learned from individuals. I like to think I'm an inquisitive person, but it began with that early shift while I was on the inside to really get into this mode of learning, right? So it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. There was a lot there, and there's different sections that I want to unpack a little bit. And I'm gonna, I myself am formerly incarcerated, so I'm just gonna take a moment here. For me, it's almost sometimes like it's impossible to explain to people what happens internally when I was incarcerated. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I can try to make analogies. I can try to say this or that, but it's like I was in one of the hardest places I had ever been in, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel for me at some points in time. And there was like, it would be there and then it would go away, it would be there and then it would go away. So I want you to try to unpack that a little bit more in terms of what was it internally that you went through, which is sometimes hard for everybody to understand, but I think that specifically will tie us back into how you're able to navigate the film and TV industry.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for that question. I think it's kind of tied back to what you mentioned earlier about people who maybe even on this call have hopes and dreams and aspirations, and they need to pursue those things. I think every day you need to get up and work toward those dreams, right? So while educating myself on the inside, of course, I was discouraged, right? Internally and externally, right? There were people who literally didn't like the fact that I was getting this education for free, as they would like to call it, right? So they would do different things to discourage us in college programs. They would discourage professors from coming in. They were various things. I think it's about keeping a goal in mind, right? And for lack of a better term, sometimes you have to trick yourself, right? You have to lie to yourself. If maybe today you wake up and you don't believe that this goal that I have is attainable, maybe you need to just lie to yourself and fool yourself to say it is, and it's attainable, and I'm going to take a step toward that today. And it's just about getting through that day. And in many ways, I just think that's how life is, right? We face obstacles, we face ups, we face downs. It's important to have people who've done it ahead of you or have representation in that way. Again, it goes back to representation, to have models of success. So like while I was pursuing my education on the inside, there were individuals who came back periodically who had graduated the college program, right? I remember in the college office, they would kind of have highlights posted of guys, updates, right? And that's something that you kind of project yourself into. I like to tell people when you're on the inside, you live vicariously through others, right? So the situation you're in is so bleak that you don't want to be there. So everything is external. You're constantly projecting yourself. One thing I would do while on the inside, when I was fortunate enough to get a paper, I would go through like the help wanted ads to just look at a job, and I would envision myself in different roles, right? And then I would ask myself, like, what would it take for me to get there, to get and be fit for this role? So let's say I see a position for whatever at whatever salary, I would say, I could see myself doing that. What would be the steps that I would have to take to be prepared for that? What can I do now? And I would try to work on myself in that way, right? And it's just like those are the things that can carry you through, but not focus solely on where you at, right? I think it's important to do the work when you're on the inside, or anywhere in life you need to do self-work, but also you need to constantly think about where you want to go, right? You need to constantly visualize yourself to become this person and to do this thing.
So again, so many gems in there, and I think that, I don't know if you would agree with me when I say, but I think you would. It's Second Chance Month, but sometimes you need to give yourself a second chance. Sometimes you need to forgive yourself in order to step into that. And I appreciate the envisioning of like thinking about how am I going to respond to the outside world that is saying that I need to be this in order to be successful when I'm literally in the trenches in the prison system. And I think sometimes it's unimaginable. So I want to center that for 1 second and say, the stories that you are providing to people who are on the inside are exactly what we are doing right now, which is you can't be what you can't see. So by creating this project in partnership with Lawrence Bartley and sharing these stories to people who are currently incarcerated, you are essentially saying in a direct way, the 4-minute mile is being ran. It got broke. Remember the 4-minute mile? The 4-minute mile got broke, and then everybody broke the 4-minute mile. You're putting out there people who run quicker than 4-minute miles. Maintaining who you are, getting into the film and TV industry. How have you maintained who you are? I'm not in that industry. I understand from an outside perspective. How have you not gotten lost in the sauce, for a better way, for a better explanation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the special things about Inside Story is the belief that the Marshall Project and Vice has in this project, and their willingness to allow Lawrence and I to lead this project. I think in terms of staying who you are and staying grounded, for me personally, it's about the voices that I want to amplify, the stories that I want to tell, staying connected, right? So as you mentioned, I'll kind of double down on that, right? So we have a segment in Inside Story called In the Spotlight, where we feature individuals who've gone on to do a number of different things and develop their careers and themselves in different ways, most of whom began on the inside. For us, it was just important to recognize that need for hope, that gem, and the transformative power of that, right? To be able to see that. For me, I think it's not difficult to just be myself and stay grounded in who I am, right? So I'm still transitioning home. I came home with a 5-year plan. October 1st makes 5 years. So I haven't even knocked everything out yet. And I just revisit those things. I try to stay as connected to people on the inside and issues that impact people on the inside and people on the outside, right? Because it's like there's a pathway to prison, right? People don't just roll out of their beds and walk into a prison cell or commit a crime, right? There's a pathway, there's a series of things that happen. So I like to stay active in the community, specifically with the youth, to get a sense of what they're thinking, because they are who I was, and I want to stay in tune with that and to protect them and contribute to their lives in what ways I can.
So what has it been like navigating? So Marshall Project is creating that space for you to lead and saying, Donald, Lawrence, you got it. But what about the rest of the colleagues and partners that you might work with outside of there? And has there been any pushback because you are formally incarcerated?
No, there actually hasn't. And if you were to look at the credits for Inside Story to see how so many people contributed to the piece, both on the staff of the Marshall Project and Vice, in addition to other people, some of whom were formerly incarcerated. So the introduction, the theme music for the show was created by a formerly incarcerated group. We try to incorporate as many voices as possible. I mean, you never know what a person feels or thinks that's unexpressed, but I haven't encountered that. Certainly, I think there are people who doubt you. There are people who aren't willing to give you a second chance. But as you mentioned, it's more important that you give yourself a second chance, right? So not every door will be open to you. I don't think that, but the doors that you're meant to get into, you will, right? And ultimately, it's about building your own door, building your own product, and shifting and not controlling, but directing and taking part in the narrative. And that's what it's about for me. I think that's a huge goal of the program. And as I mentioned, the show is not just for people who are currently incarcerated, have been, but it's for everyone who's impacted by the system, because different people are impacted by different ways. Prison administrators are impacted by the criminal justice system. It may not be the same way that a relative of someone who's incarcerated is, but there's an impact, right? There's a human impact because we're all humans. And we're navigating this process and these systems as they change, as they evolve, right? As we refine things. So as I mentioned, and as you mentioned, it's important to give yourself a second chance, right? Because if you don't give yourself a second chance at life, no one else will, no one else can.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think that something that I've said before is the system provides trauma to all people. Whether or not you've been to prison or not, you have been impacted by the system in one way or the other, and kind of centering that in terms of like, it's going to take all stakeholders figuring out how to change the trajectory that we are going here in this nation. So you talked about narrative. And I want to understand, you talk about the voices of formerly incarcerated people, you're centering from, what is it like telling the stories of people who have been to prison? How do you bring that to life?
Yeah. I wouldn't say delicately, but I would say in a way that's conscious of people's experience and the trauma of life and of the system and of the things that have led people to be incarcerated or involved with the criminal justice system. One of the things that happened early on in this webinar was a discussion about language, right? And people first language. And it's about being conscious, it's about being aware, and it's about being considerate. But it's also about being truthful, right? So like in terms of journalism, it's like you have to stay true to the journalism, and that doesn't call for you to paint a person in one particular light, be it favorable or otherwise. It's about telling the stories and reporting the news as it is, and it's key to stay on that track, right? To stick with that and say, listen, that this is a work of journalism, and we're just going to report the truth as it is.
So there's probably a lot of stories that stick out to you, and a lot of special people that have done a lot of special things. Mm-hmm. Is there one in particular that you might want to highlight here in this conversation on how you may have worked with that person to make it come to life? And if so, what did that process look like?
Yeah, I would say overall that the in the spotlight segment, it was just beautiful in how it developed and how we devised how it would be shot and how it would roll out. There are a number of things I like to highlight. Some interviews, in particular, the first episode is an interview between Lawrence and Brian Stevenson, and it's a really powerful interview. One of the challenges of making TV is that you have to leave some things on the cutting room floor, right? And so not every bit and piece of a conversation is able to make it in. But I would encourage people to go and watch that interview and watch the entire series. There's an interview with Dr. Carl Hart, which is very, very powerful, as well as the other interviews. We have a number of guests who offer a wide range of perspectives. Conversations with members of the Baltimore PD, right? We want to incorporate all the voices, everyone who's involved in this. So yeah, it's always, it's for each segment, for each shoot, it's different. There's a different challenge that's presented. But it's really about just getting to the core of the issues and the core of the message.
I appreciate that. I have a kind of an interesting question here. If you could go back into time to capture a person's story that has been impacted by the criminal system, who would you want to sit with?
Someone who's been impacted by the system. I mean, I automatically think to someone like Malcolm X, right? Because so much of his change in the trajectory of his life occurred while he was in prison. And he has like this quote about if a person can't make it to, I think he spoke specifically to Black males, if you can't go to a university or college, you should go to prison. And I think he kind of recognized the opportunity that it could present for some individuals, given the right circumstances. But I'm always curious about exactly what his experience was like, because he's had such an impact in our country and in the world in general. Like, what was that like? There's so many people who've faced imprisonment on some level, and I think it's different for different people. But in particular, when it comes to him, I think it's just like looking at his early years and his origin and how he just kind of shifted and went in a different direction. I'd be curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, that is, Malcolm X was just a visionary thought leader ahead of his time, really, to be honest with you, but also conscious of what the present moment looked like. And so as you have a vision, and I'm not going to ask what that vision is yet. We're going to leave that there. In drawing that parallel of having that vision, and you are here in the present capturing stories of people from the past and also, that have been to prison, etc. Do you think that these stories are impacting institutions and policies?
I'm hopeful that they will have an impact on institutions and policies. So in our 8th episode, we talked about a special housing unit in Thompson Federal Prison, and that prison has, that unit has since been closed. Now that unit was closed prior to the release of Inside Story, but prior to that, there was reporting done by the Marshall Project, and I like to think that part of that reporting contributed to this unit that was very violent, right? For everyone there were numerous complaints about staff and the level of violence and the use of force that they had there. I think people often say, hey, they're on the inside, they did something, they deserve what they get. It's important to remember that these are human beings, right? And they need to be treated in a humane manner. And also that of the nearly 2 million people incarcerated, the vast majority will be returned into society. How do you want them to return, right? And part of what you can expect, you can draw from how they're treated, right? So that's.
Yeah, I think that also I think that there's I think that there is a lot of complex layers that contribute to somebody being incarcerated, whether, and a lot of those can be labeled as adverse childhood experiences, right? ACEs are things that young people go through, whether that is being neglected, whether that is physically abused, whether that's being around in an environment that's filled with drugs and alcohol. Those things impact you at the micro level, which can end up impacting the trajectory of your life. What type of area did you grow up in when you were younger? And was there something as an ace that was a contributing factor to your trajectory of ending up in prison?
Definitely, definitely. So I'm from East New York in Brooklyn, which is or has been one of the more notorious neighborhoods in Brooklyn. Like I told you about how I saw this program, this PBS program, and it kind of sparked something in me. I like to think that it kind of helped me change the trajectory of my life in that up to that point, I had just been living out this family legacy of addiction, crime, incarceration, right? So I've been impacted by all of those things. I don't think that the circumstances that I was born into negates or in any way diminishes the impact of my choices and the things that I've done in life, but I do recognize that they were a factor, right? So having drug addicted parents and what have you, being introduced to the system early on, right? So before I ever went to a prison or institution, I was in the foster care system, right? And there's this sort of pipeline where people go from the foster care system to juvenile facilities to adult facilities. And I was kind of in that rung. Like I did that. Like people would go from foster care to group homes to juvenile facilities to the big house, as they might say. I was definitely impacted by those things. Again, that doesn't diminish the fact that I made choices, right? That doesn't take away my culpability at all. But I think it's important that we do recognize that these are factors, right? There is something called a school to prison pipeline. These are real things. These are real dynamics that need to be addressed. I think that so often people look at those who haven't committed crimes to say, hey, it can't be true because this person didn't do it, right? So each person is impacted by things differently, right? I think until as a society we begin to recognize that, we'll kind of hide behind the other argument that, you know, not everyone does this. I don't think that anybody is taking it to that extreme. It's just saying that these are contributing factors, right? So it's like a person is the sum total of their experience, right? The sum total meaning all of their experience. And they're different components, right? So they're different ingredients that get different results. And I think that it's important that we all recognize that, you know, there's something in that ingredient that led to that thing, right? So everyone in my family has been incarcerated, right? So it was expected of me by myself to be incarcerated. So like, I didn't feel like I was bringing shame to my family when I was incarcerated. Like I never had that sense. I know there's some people who have, but that's not my family experience, right? Now that doesn't take away our responsibility or the fact that we should have been held accountable for the things that we've done. But I think that's a reason for people to say, I think there may be something here, right? Yeah, that's a very long-winded answer, but
No, no, no. I'm gonna build with you, and just and if you're okay with it, I'm gonna draw the parallels of my experience as well. You know, I remember watching my uncle come home from the first time. I was like 10, and I was kind of scared. He had all these tattoos. He would be, you know, proud of where I am today, but back then I didn't know what it was happening. And it's like these things that you go through as a younger person, whether a child into young adulthood, they're preconditioning you. And they're saying, hey, Donald, it is okay for you to go to jail and prison because everybody else has. And unfortunately, it's as if the narrative of life says, just like you said, yeah, okay, there's choices that people make, but people really don't want to divest into those factors. Whether those factors are a lack of access to like great educational opportunities, whether it's simply living in a food desert, you can't think if you don't have good food. All of those things contribute to the choices that people make. but more so than contributing to the choices that people make, is they kind of color your image of the world in a way that says like, hey, it's okay if you do these things because this is what you may or may not be, surrounded by. So when we think about second chances and we think about Second Chance Month in particular, yes, let's highlight and uplift people who are formerly incarcerated, but let's also not forget the neighborhoods and the families that those people come from, because it might not be the best condition for them to succeed. And I think we talk about equality versus equity. Equity is providing everybody that it's different levels of help in that step up there. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to keep the vision question last because I do want to know what it is that you want to see happen next. And then I also want you to let everybody know where they can find you at. But we're going to transition over into the audience Q&A. So Kimberly, if you have any of the audience Q&As, I don't know if you could put them in the chat right now. That would be helpful, or if you want to come on screen, either or.
So I have some questions. I'm not Kimberly, sorry to disappoint.
No problem. You do not disappoint, Stacy.
So I have a question from our frequent collaborator, Charlotte West, for Johnny. She mentions that she saw the article that you published on the TMP website about why you decided to work with tablet providers to bring your content inside. And she said it seems to be more controversial among outside activists than the inside audience. So how did you, as a media outlet, navigate the tension around working with these big prison tech companies?
Great, that's a great question, and I think we have a list of FAQs which kind of address that question in particular. But what I will say is, where there's a need, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, to what extent does that need to be satisfied, and what does that cost mean, right? So in entering in a relationship with other entities, one thing about the Marshall Project is our material is free. It's always going to be free for individuals on the inside, and I'll say that. I know there are various people who object to the use of some prison tablets and some prison tablet companies, but I think that we all recognize the need to be practical, right? If there's a family so while I was on the inside, this was prior to Governor Cuomo, this was in New York State, Governor Cuomo changing laws, the price to call home was just ridiculous, right? And it created this huge burden for families, but there were people who accepted those calls, right? And there were people who made those calls because there's this need to connect. There's this human need. And I think at that time, there were many people who objected to how things were going with the phone companies, but yet and still, in the interest of being practical and being reasonable and connecting with their families, they still accepted those calls. I mean, we're talking $1.70 a minute, right? That sort of thing. And it's just like, what? I mean, it was more in some places. Some places, I think it might have got up to like $2.25. And this was years ago, not under this current inflated $2.25, right? That was a significant amount of money. You're thinking about a 30-minute call, but it was just like, I still needed to call my family. I still needed to contact them. Now, maybe I didn't talk to them for the entire 30 minutes. And I just say all that to say that sometimes we have to ask ourselves whether what we think and what we feel is practical, and what are the best methods to change this problem and this issue. And for those who have specific questions about the Marshall Project's decision to partner with different companies, they should go to our website and check the FAQs on there where it's being directly addressed.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Stacy, and thank you for that question as well, Charlotte. I think that we should all provide each other a little bit of grace when we talk about the activist perspective in terms of the imagined future, specifically from the abolitionist lens perspective. I direct a prison education project. I partner with the Department of Corrections, the Department of Community Supervision. But what I do is I provide opportunity for empowerment to people who might not have had that opportunity if those partnerships weren't there. It's a complex process, and we have a long way to go, but I'm glad to see formerly incarcerated leaders stepping up, sharing the stories of other formerly incarcerated people through the current means that are available across the United States of America. And so maybe a formerly incarcerated person needs to start a tablet company. I don't know, start a tablet company, get it going, bring it out there, or whatever it is. Is there another question?
Well, I'd like to just kind of build on that a little bit. And I think that it's really easy from the standpoint of someone outside saying, this thing is bad, this thing works this way, and we think it's terrible. But as someone who used a tablet when I was inside, and that was the only way for me to teach myself math for a while. In all seriousness, it's really hard to make those judgments, and it kind of fosters into that idea that we can't advocate for ourselves, and if that's the only method that we have available to learn about the world outside, isn't it better that we have access to more rather than be restricted because someone thinks that the business model is bad? And we've struggled with some of that with access in prison. We're actively testing with tablet providers, but I think that there is a way that we can interact ethically with these stakeholders, because they really can play a vital role in the development and education if we wield them wisely. But if we're not listening to the people who are impacted by the conditions inside and just say, oh, they're bad, no one should have them, I think we're missing out on an opportunity. And isn't it kind of the same thing? I mean, Donnie, I'm really curious at your opinion on it, but it's also kind of the same way people look at us who have been through the system, like inherently there's something bad, therefore we reject. Isn't it kind of the same mentality?
I guess it's kind of, it can be an all or nothing mentality, but I think, again, to your point, and one of the things that we did at the Marshall Project was ask people who are directly impacted by this, do you want these products, right? Do you want News Inside? Do you want Inside Story if it comes in on this type of tablet, right? And certainly we have relationships with other tablet companies who don't charge anything to the end user. But we ask people who received and who have to pay for certain things, like, how do you feel about receiving it on? And people said they wanted it. Right? No one said, I don't want you to provide this thing that's beneficial to me because of this cost, right? I think that people on the inside recognize how practical it is to have this thing at this point. While I was on the inside, they weren't tablets. They were just about to roll them in. And I wish there had been during the time when I was on the inside, seeing how loved ones are able to connect so quickly as we live in this mobile age, right? People aren't writing letters anymore, right? But a person can send you an email or the equivalent of a text with relative ease. And to your point, I think there's still room to grow and there's still space, and we need to all work toward the betterment of all of the systems around this unfortunate institution, right, called the prison system.
Yeah, and just to jump in here, Stacy, and I want to kind of paint a quick picture with the JSTOR Access in prison and the utilization of a partnership with the current tablet provider. Imagine how many people we would leave out if we didn't, right? Imagine how many people wouldn't gain the language to push back against the system. I gained the language to press back against the system when I stepped into education. I gained more of that language when I learned how to cite the same literature that was used to lock me up. So I think that there's a dynamic shift that's happening with the release of Pell starting July 1st, with access in prison, with these stories. We're providing education. We're saying you can be this and you can be that. And unfortunately, I don't think that there's enough people that are like, it's going to take more of us, basically, more people coming home with education to press back, to push against the different initiatives that hold us down, continuously to oppress people of color, and put us in positions where we're not able to succeed later on because of these labels. Okay, so we're going to give the final word to Donald. So first off, I want you to tell us your vision for either where you would like that, where would you like Inside Story to go, where you want to go, and then if you would tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, so first you can find Inside Story on the Marshall Project's website. You can search Inside Story. You could also go onto the Vice News YouTube. It should have its own playlist. It's actually the top playlist in their list of playlists. Right, that's a mouthful. In terms of my vision and where I would like Inside Story to go, in particular this first season, which has currently been out, like I said, we're well over 1 million views for this first season. I like everyone who's impacted by this issue to give it a watch, right? I like people to have conversation around it. I think it draws on different issues and different experiences. For instance, the second episode features A Life Inside, which is a firsthand account. This is something that we do at the Marshall Project. It's a firsthand account of someone who has a touch point on the inside. We animated that, and it's a mother who's telling the story of her first visit to a son who's incarcerated, right? That's the sort of thing that could be used to facilitate this conversation between families, right? Like, hey, while you on inside, I had this experience, right? And let me talk about that, because the prison system can be traumatic for everyone, as you mentioned, Patrick, right? So we hope to facilitate conversation around it, and we hope people can be more informed of what this system is, what it looks like, and have a better sense of some of the perspectives of it. So I love for people to share it as they can.
All right.
Thank you. Oh,
ladies.
I was just gonna say thank you.
Right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Stacy for jumping on cam. This is the first of series that are, I'm trying to do it like a TV announcer. Sorry, guys. Let me reset. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Second Chance Chat, brought to you by JSTOR's Access in Prison Initiative. Shout out to Stacy. Shout out to Donald. Shout out to everybody behind the scenes that have made this happen. Stacy, if you want to close with where they would find you / find the next series of webinars that are going to happen, then we'll close it out.
Oh, well, thank you, Patrick. See, that was my newscaster, attempt. Back to you. Our Second Chance Chats are going to be every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, next week, we will have Keri Blakinger, who actually kind of made a name for herself at the Marshall Project. I promise we're not poaching all of their talent for this series. It's coincidence. You can follow us on LinkedIn at JSTOR Access in Prison for the most up-to-date information. And read our essays every month. They're very impactful. I encourage people to interact with them, spend some time with them, and kind of get a feel for what life is like for people on the inside, and how they use their education, or sometimes their lack of education, how that's motivating them to kind of get to the next level. So there's a lot of value in there, and it's authentic. And I'm very proud of that, and the support at Ithaca to continue looking into these issues, digging a little bit deeper, and really staying curious and centering the needs of the people who are currently in carceral settings. So thank you. Thank you, everyone out there. If you want to sign up, the links will be in the follow-up with the recording of this video. So thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Good luck and be well.